Dragon Age the Veilguard will not have any DLC or expansions. Instead, BioWare is already moving their development teams over to Mass Effect 5, indicating that this game does not have breakout potential, in contrast to what EA CEO Andrew Wilson recently said at the end of October. I wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. You can find the link in the description below. You can also find a link to become a member of the channel and help support me doing what I am doing here. So we got this report from George Yang over at Rolling Stone. He reported this just a couple days ago on Halloween. He says, with Dragon Age the Veilguard now complete, BioWare confirms that there are currently no plans for downloadable expansions. He added the developers' full attention has now shifted entirely to the next Mass Effect as their current project. We then got a subsequent report from Kat Bailey at IGN, who detailed that BioWare is not completely abandoning Dragon Age the Veilguard following its release, but will support the game, quote, with quality of life improvements and a handful of smaller content updates. None of this sounds anything like the breakout potential that EA CEO Andrew Wilson was describing the game having in a recent earnings call with investors. If you recall, he said this: "It's an amazing time at EA. And in 2 days, we will launch Dragon Age the Veilguard. It's been 10 years since we launched its predecessor, Game of the Year winner, Dragon Age Inquisition. Early critic scores are strong and reflect the high-quality depth and detail in Niche's action-packed adventure. We expect Dragon Age to be a great example of how our blockbuster storytelling engages and connects fans in truly unique ways." So in the Q&A portion of the call, he also responded to a question asked by Raymond James Financial Group analyst Andrew Merrick. Merrick asked this: I've seen some very strong, Merrick asked this: I've seen some very strong reviews so far, but as far as you can tell, what drives that kind of breakout success we've seen in some single-player fantasy games in the last couple of years, and how do you feel that Veilguard might compare along those lines? And Wilson said this: I certainly think Veilguard has breakout potential. Let me say that again. I certainly think Veilguard has a breakout potential. If you thought that, why would you not be investing more into the game? Why would you not be investing into DLC, into expansions that you can further monetize, especially when that has been a staple of BioWare Dragon Age games going back all the way to Origins, where they do indeed usually have DLC or expansions to further extend the life cycle of the game. That's not what they are doing here. I do not think that this guy believes that it has a breakout potential. I think this was all bluster in order to convince investors that they are making the right decisions here, when all other points of evidence were showing that this game was not going to perform well, other than those strong critic reviews, and even those were coming under fire for how EA and BioWare were seemingly manipulating them and curating who was actually able to review the game ahead of time. So he went on and said this. Again, 10 years ago, Dragon Age Inquisition won Game of the Year and was a very strong performer for us in the context of our business. This is entertainment. And so while much of our business has moved to live service moment to moment, deliver innovation and creativity for a deeply engaged community over the course of time, this opportunity to bring incredibly high-quality creative storytelling set in an amazing world with rich characters, living out those stories, you're able to capture that moment in entertainment. Success almost certainly follows. So I talked about this already. Dragon Age Veilguard does not provide any of these things. It does not have creative storytelling. It's not set in an amazing world. It does not feature rich characters. So you're not going to get success because you don't have any of those things. Anyways, he goes on and says this: and we see that in the context of movies, and we're seeing in the context of TV seasons, and we see in the context of video games. When we think about what we have with Veilguard right now, we have a storied studio on BioWare. We have a storied IP in Dragon Age. We have a team that took extra time to make sure the world was rich and the characters were interesting and the story was compelling. I think we're going into a market that has limited competition for this category of game, given some of the moves that happened across the broader industry, which the fact that he's saying that it has limited competition, the fact that they're not doing DLC, they're not doing any expansions, and then when we actually look at the numbers here, didn't even get over 90,000 peak concurrent, indicates it's not going well for this game. And so I think it's too early to predict the outcome. The critical reviews have been incredibly strong. The team feels really energized by what they have delivered, and my sense is that, yes, it has breakout capabilities. So all of this I've kind of discussed before. This idea that the critical reviews have been strong. Well, Star Wars Outlaws and Ubisoft said the same thing. Look how that game turned out. A complete and utter flop. Only 1 million sales in a month when they were expecting on the conservative end at least 5 million. So they didn't even get, 20%? They got around 20% of what they were expecting on the very low end of expectations, which is abysmal. They did abysmal. And then the team feeling really energized. Well, so did Firewalk Studios. Where are they now? They don't exist. Sony is literally shutting them down. Their game Concord was shut down 2 weeks after release. So they're gone. So while Wilson claimed the game had breakout capabilities, we got this guy, the chief financial officer over at EA, Stuart Canfield, was basically saying that the company was, quote, maintaining our assumptions for upcoming Dragon Age: The Veilguard launch this week and our partner title slated to launch in Q4. So again, what Wilson was doing was all bluster, because when you get the nuts and bolts guy here, the actual chief financial officer, he's like, yeah, we're not actually changing anything despite what Andrew's saying about breakout potential. Our assumptions are still the same. He then added, turning to Q3, we expect net bookings of 2.4 to 2.55 billion, up 1% to up 8% year over year, largely driven by the launch of Dragon Age and continued growth in our EA Sports FC franchise. So these numbers will be really important to look at when we get to their Q3 report, this 2.4 to 2.55 billion net bookings in the third quarter. So we'll see if that number comes in lower. And I think that will really kind of determine how well Dragon Age performed. Now, obviously, there's going to be some discrepancies there potentially because EA Sports FC could overperform. They could have other things that overperform that do well that kind of cover for Dragon Age. But I will definitely be looking at these numbers to see if they match up to what they're saying here, if those Q3 numbers actually match up to this. Because remember, we know that Ubisoft decreased their expectations heading into their Q2 financial report, which is when Star Wars Outlaws released. They decreased them by 30% from 500 million euros to a range between 350 and 370 million euros. They eventually reported they did 351 million euros. So it was on the low end of what they decreased their expectations to. And that, I think, shows how poorly Star Wars Outlaws actually did, where they decreased their expectations by 150 million euros. That's how poorly that game did. So, and then I've kind of discussed this here, right? If the game, he was so confident about the game's breakout potential, they would be investing in DLC that players would want to purchase for the game. We saw this with Elden Ring, right? They introduced DLC earlier this year, Shadow of the Erd Tree. It did absolutely bonkers numbers. We saw what I think it was 950 something when Elden Ring peaked on Steam. And then when Erd Tree came out, it still did over 700,000 peak concurrent. So you still had people coming on. And it shows that there's a lot of people that did indeed purchase that DLC, drove more revenue to the company, to From Software. So you would think that is something that you would be doing if you're a game company and you actually believed in this game having a breakout success, having breakout potential. That does not seem to be the case, given the fact that they are completely abandoning this game, it looks like, for the most part. No DLC, no expansions, and then moving all of their development team to Mass Effect 5. It looks like they are cutting their losses with this game and moving on. So I think their actions speak louder than their words, and we're seeing what they are doing rather than what they are telling us they are doing. I think they know that this was going to be an utter disaster based on the lead up to it. All other points of evidence were pointing to that. Soft sales retail, poor positioning on the Steam charts, etc. leading up to it. There was no real competition when it was released, so clearly it hit the top of the top sellers list. But then when you look at the concurrent numbers, didn't even break 80,000 on its first day, did not break 90,000 concurrent in its first weekend. Really, really bad signs for this game. And as I said in a video yesterday, I think this game is a massive flop. And I think they actually might lose money on this game, given the fact that they had a 10-year development cycle. There was all kinds of development hell with this game. And then they kind of just churned out this humiliation ritual that they expect people to purchase this poopy toy, this toy that they took, they pooped on, and then they are trying to sell it back to you. And we're like, no, no, thanks. We do not want that. And they're stuck with the bag now. But let me know what you guys make of EA, BioWare admitting that there will be no DLC or expansion for Dragon Age the Veilguard, and that they are moving their development teams to Mass Effect, the next Mass Effect game, already, basically banning this game as soon as it launched. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.